soldiers on two fronts.
All right, everybody, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here on a summer day. We appreciate it. And thank you to Santo Cafora, who is here to speak with us today from the Diversity Action Team of Rock County. He said he's been doing this work since around 1975. So I would consider him, if we were to say expert without being an expert of anything, that he definitely has a ton of knowledge, and I'm just so excited that he's here with us today. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Santo. If you cannot see the screen, I would ask that you move at this time to do that. And then for a reminder, if you have questions, Santo is okay if we ask throughout the presentation. Just raise your hand and I'll get you the mic so that it can be picked up. Okay? All right, thank you.
So let's see, can you hear me okay? Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you, Jen. And Jen is right, I have been doing this work since 1975 as a high school teacher at Craig. And I never planned to do this work. And it's been an interesting experience. Come on in, Barb. Gene will catch people as they're coming in. So a little bit of history and a little bit of background. I'm here to talk about the Diversity Action Team of Rock County. And I'm really proud to be a member of that organization. And that's been around since 1998. But Gene and I got married in 1970. And we were married for 4 days before we came to Janesville, Wisconsin, 4 or 5 days. And we just decided that since we had such a quick honeymoon, we would just honeymoon for the rest of our marriage. So this year we'll be celebrating 53 years.
Wow.
And yeah, a lot of great experiences. And we decided to stay in Janesville, which totally, I look back now, I'm like, wow, I can't believe we did that. Because in 1970, I was sitting at a faculty meeting at Janesville Craig, and I was sitting around with a bunch of teachers, and they were saying to me, wow, you talk with such a dialect. Would you talk for us a little bit? And now you remember, I was born in Brooklyn, New York. I had a strong 20-30 Jersey kind of dialect, and it really was normal, and it was natural for me, and that's just who I was. And the teachers would kind of tease me. I was sitting at a table with maybe half a dozen teachers, and they would say, hey, how does this sound? Does this sound Brooklyn-ish enough? Or does this sound New Jersey-ish enough? And it was kind of fun for a little bit, but then after a while it got to be really old. So long story short, it got into a conversation, and they said, so Santo, where are you from? And I said, you're already mimicking me about my New York accent. What do you mean, where am I from? What don't you get about where I'm from? Well, where are you really from? So what do you think they really wanted to know about me?
Where your name came from.
Yeah, what's your ethnicity? Where's your background? So then I had done a little bit of research before I came to Janesville, Wisconsin, and I learned that Janesville was a very white-on-white community. And I said, so tell me, where do you think I'm from? Well, and then they decided to change the way they pronounced my name. With a name like Santo, you must be Puerto Rican. And I'm like, no, I'm not really Puerto Rican. And I could tell by the look on their faces that that was a relief. And that made me feel really like, oh. Then you must be Mexican because Santo has a Latin derivative to it. I said, yeah, it really does. But I'm not Mexican either. I can't even talk my way in and out of the baño. I don't know any Spanish. Really? So when they learned that I'm an Italian American, I can tell I was welcomed. And I can also tell how uncomfortable I felt. I thought, this is crazy. I remember going home and I said to Jean, I don't know if we really want to stay in this community and raise kids here, because I don't feel like I'm welcomed. And I know that there are people I left back in New York who definitely wouldn't be welcomed. And I said, why would we want to stay in this place? And Jean, of course, is from Missouri, and she loved the Midwest, and I liked the Midwest. I was fine living here, but I wasn't sure I wanted to stay here in Janesville, Wisconsin, or Janesburg, Wisconsin. But to go back to New York, we needed a master's degree. I had taught in New York the year before, and we needed a master's degree. And I said, well, why don't we just go get our master's degrees, and then we'll go back to the land of milk and honey, where I'm used to diversity, and I'm used to people saying and talking and doing things that I don't understand, people speaking in Chinese and Japanese and other languages, and brown and black people mingling with people who are not brown and black. That's what we were going to do. So I got my master's degree in African American Studies, Multicultural Education, and Russian Studies. And I went back, and I did it at nights and weekends. because we couldn't afford to go to school full-time and pull out of teaching. And I remember saying to Jack Zai at the time, some of you might remember that name, he was the director of instruction at Janesville High School, Janesville School District. I said, Jack, I want to teach a class on African American history. He said, who's going to take it? We're all white. I said, that's my point. I said, everybody around here seems to think if you don't look like them, sound like them, there's something wrong with you. I said, we need to prepare these kids to leave Janesville. We need to prepare them to go to places like Los Angeles and Texas and California and New York or wherever, Chicago. I said, we're kind of like in a little bubble here in just Jamesburg, Wisconsin. He said, well, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. We had to revamp our entire curriculum because everybody in the 11th grade was required to take a standard American history class. So in order to get black studies in, we needed to revamp the curriculum. And the only reason we wanted to revamp the curriculum is because the history books didn't do justice to African Americans or Native Americans or women, you know, 3 of the leading minority groups in the United States. And I'm like, we need a women's history class, we need an African American history class, we need a Native American history class, because the history books are just white on white, European, male-dominated teaching. I'm like, this is wrong. So we actually taught that class at Janesville Craig for nearly 20 years. And the only reason we stopped teaching it is because at the time our national director of education was William Bennett. And he talked about going back to basics. And it was another way of saving money. So instead of having multiple textbooks, we ended up with 1 textbook again, and we went back to teaching sterile American history. Ooh, that's a biased comment, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But it is what it is, you know, and I taught it for many years. But in the process, we ended up connecting with kids in different ways. And in 1993, some of you might recall, the Ku Klux Klan decided to come to Rock County. Mm-hmm. We were not proud of the Ku Klux Klan coming to Rock County. It was an ugly part of our history, but we had an ugly part of our history before then. And I came to learn that, as, living here and working here, et cetera. And there were a lot of great people in Rock County like yourselves who did not own that history, but happened to live here just the same. So, long story short, our superintendent in Beloit was married to the superintendent in Janesville. Beloit and Janesville superintendents were married to each other. And they brought the communities together, and they brought the kids together. And so began workshops and diversity training and things along those lines. And so I started doing this work more with students. And then, now we'll get into the diversity action team of Rock County. So about 1998, the diversity action team of Rock County was officially established. What you see in front of you is our current board of directors. And the reason this organization got started, I can blame it on Leslie and the American Association of University Women. You want me to blame it on you, Leslie? I can give her credit for that. How's that? Give credit. We always say Leslie was the grandmother of the Diversity Action Team in Rock County. But now, since we've been around 25 years, we call her our great-grandmother.
Wow.
So some of the names up there might look familiar to you. Mark Perry, our current president, and Billy Bob, our current vice president, and Tess Wynn and Vicki Brown, Jose Carrillo, Neil Dupree, Jane Thompson, myself, Jill Gant, down to Angela Moore, Stephanie Agnew, Steve Smith. They're not all Janesville people, but they're all Rock County people. And we are the diversity action team of Rock County. Into the history. The founding members on top, not necessarily in alphabetical order, is Leslie. Because Leslie was kind of one of the shakers and bakers from the American Association of University Women. And Leslie, do you want to say anything about how you guys got it started, or?
Well, we started.
Can you all hear okay?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I was a teacher one time too. But we started a program called Adelante, which means welcome or come in. It was a national initiative from our organization. Oh, I hate these things. Okay, it was a national initiative from our organization, and Adelante is Spanish. I didn't even know Spanish back then, but I do now. And it was to try to get our group to become more diverse. And because we again, just like Santo said, we're white on white.
Yep.
But we were women white on white. 3 W's.
Which made you even more
More,
excited.
yes. So anyway, we tried doing a few things for 3 years with our group and thought, nobody's really getting excited about this, as excited as we are. There must be other people in our community that might want to do something more. So we had a breakfast down at what is now the Citrus Cafe, I think it was Riverside Inn.
Yeah.
Santa was invited, different people from the school district, the YWCA, the YMCA, some counselors, and decided that we would meet at, what was it?
United Way.
No, we didn't. We met out at Lab Safety, in the
Oh.
boardroom at Lab Safety. It was so important. We were in the biggest boardroom in town. And that's when, in December of '97, we decided we were going to become a community group and go under the United Way, so we would be something more than just community people. We would be under their umbrella. And that's kind of how it got started, and our first meeting was in 1998.
So why did it get started? What was the urgency? What was the need?
Well, because I think we've always been an exclusive group down at AAUW. You had to be a woman at that time.
They wouldn't let me in.
No. You had to be a woman. All the women that were there were either teachers or nurses. There wasn't a lot of variety. Most of them were Christian. We did a survey of our group, and it was one that we wouldn't know who wrote what because there were little colored cards, and each one stood for a different thing. And they threw them all in. Everyone got like 6 or 7 different colored cards, and one had to do with religion, one gender, one, age, that kind of thing. And we did a whole list and presented it to our group and said, this is who we are. And if this is who we are, we're not gonna last forever. We need young people. We need males. We need, and that's kind of how we got started. And then we met other people in town, and that's
How it all started to evolve.
Right. And it was scary, guys. It was scary. I remember I went to Wanda Sloan and I said, how do we meet people of color? I don't even know one. Well, Wanda is one. But she was the DEI person out at Black Hawk Tech. And she said, come to Juneteenth. Because there are a lot of black people there. It's kind of a family reunion type thing that they do each year. And this was back in '96. And I didn't go because I was scared. I was afraid I'd be the only white person there. And then now I think of it and I think, well, why don't we have any black people here at First Lutheran Church? It's not an easy thing to step into. But this is your program, this isn't mine.
Well, that's why I got you to do it. You kind of defer the program. So the way I heard the story, and what Leslie shared with you is as accurate as she can share with you. But I heard the story that everything she said, plus there were brown and black people moving into Janesville and they weren't staying.
Oh, that's true too.
And that's what caught my attention. As an educator, I'm like, why aren't they staying? And I would experience that at Craig High School too. I'd have Latinos in my classroom. I didn't have blacks. We didn't have a lot of black kids anywhere in Janesville at that time in the 90s, a few kids here and there. When I taught black history, from like 1976 to almost 1990, I had two African American students, which was fine. Now I would have a room full of African American students if I was to walk through Craig High School right now. The demographics have changed tremendously. And it was kind of like when we lived in Brooklyn, New York, my dad would say, remember West Side Story when the blacks and the Jets were moving into the big city and the whites were moving out? Well, we were part of that white flight when I was a kid, and my dad would say, here they come. And I was like 4 and 5 years old. I had no idea who was coming. The Indians, who's coming? What's happening? And here they come. And he was talking about the Puerto Ricans and the African Americans who were moving into the big city, and we were moving out. But I didn't know what he was talking about at that point. But now it's like, here they come. Now there's a whole different attitude, a whole different inflection of, well, here they come versus here they come. We're excited to mix and to merge and our inclusivity is improving. We got ways to go, but it's improving. So I remembered connecting with my good friend Jose Carrillo because I had some of his students, his children in class. And he couldn't even find a house to rent in Janesville in 1972, 73, 74. So he worked at General Motors when they finally would let a Latino man work at General Motors. But he was living in Kenosha at the time. He couldn't find a place to live. And some of you may have learned of the name John Scott Sr. John Scott was also a member of General Motors. He worked at General Motors, but he wanted to live in Janesville. In order to live in Janesville, he found a house, but then he needed to go around the neighborhood. He was in the 4th Ward area. He needed to go around the neighborhood and have people sign a petition saying it would be okay for an African-American family to move in the community because we had restricted covenants in Janesville, keeping people, brown and black, from selling your homes or your property to brown and black people. So Jose, I had his students in class, and I understood that, and his students weren't known as, his children were not Carrillos. So when he came in for parents' night, I'm like, how come you're a Carrillo and your kids aren't? He goes, Santo, you gotta learn something about my history. And he came in undocumented, and he had to give them a name of a family that was documented just in case he and his wife got deported. So here they're here still in Janesville in 2023. They are citizens for well over 30 years, and their kids are amazing. But they went through Craig, but they didn't leave Janesville, Craig. They stayed. A lot of people were leaving, so Leslie's group gets involved and says, what are we doing wrong? Why aren't people staying? And so began the Diversity Action Team in Rock County. That's a real long story for a short answer, a real short answer for a long story, whatever it may be. So the Diversity Action Team, we just met again this summer as a board to revise, to do some strategic planning. And Sue Conway was nice enough to facilitate that meeting, which was wonderful. You don't want to have people from your own organization. And Sue Conway comes to our organization. She's actually a member of our organization, but she's not on our board, and she graciously donates her time to do this kind of thing for us. And our vision is, we want to be recognized as a catalyst to create a community that's less segregated, more open, welcoming, and inclusive. When Mark Freitag came to Janesville a little over 9 years ago, he got a hold of us, and he wanted us to read the city's diversity statement. We kind of became like the ombudsman in Janesville and Rock County when people had issues dealing with diversity. Christine Moore was doing some work in Janesville. I don't remember if it was with Forward Janesville or.
Are you talking about Immigration Support Network?
Yeah,
I'm not sure
well,
which
before the
phase of my life
even
you're
even
referring
before
to.
the Immigrant Support Network. But you were doing some work with diversity, and Bob Baldwin and I were connected with all of that. But the Diversity Action Team has been asked to be involved in a variety of different organizations in Janesville, including the city, the police department, et cetera. And then this was our revised mission statement. We want to eliminate racism and all forms of discrimination in Rock County. That's a grandiose statement. But you should have a grandiose statement. Your mission should be something that's very idealistic, but also work on making it doable. And our goal is to make it doable. Promoting diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. We forget all about the people who have trouble getting around. We forget all about the American Disabilities Act that came into effect in 1990. And there was lots of pushback with the American Disabilities Act. Why? Because now we're going to have to spend money to change the sidewalks so people in wheelchairs can get up and down sidewalks. Now we have people who are our age who are happy that they have these special sidewalks because we can get up and down without having to take those steps, whatever it may be. But the piece is we foster justice, dignity, and respect for everyone. And we do it through education. Most of us in the organization are either educators or we have a value for education in trying to make a difference. Any questions on that? DEI is a term that has been used in recent years in this work. It used to be diversity training, cultural competency training, human relations training, and now they decided we should call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. People like Peggy know we go in circles in education and we keep changing the names for things to protect the innocent, or maybe so we can sell new textbooks. I don't know why we keep changing things, but we change things just to make it fresh and new, but the basic value of what we do is the same. Build relationships, build bridges, and give people an opportunity to be valued for who they are. So they can call it DEI work, they can call it cultural competency work, they can call it whatever they want. The work hasn't changed, although the names have changed. So just keep that in the back of your mind. So we partner with a variety of organizations in Rock County, starting with Community Action of Rock County and Walworth counties, the League of Women Voters, the YWCA, the YMCA, the NAACP of our county. As a matter of fact, John Scott Sr., back in 1972, 73, some of you might remember this name from the past also, a guy named Fred Holt. Yes, 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 you remember Fred Holt. And Fred Holt pulled some people together to meet with John Scott. Well, at that time, I was like 24, 25, and can you remember when you were 24 and 25? You knew everything. Nobody could tell you a darn thing when you were 24 and 25. You had it all figured out. And I remember going to this meeting, and John Scott was there, and he wanted to form an NAACP in Janesville, Wisconsin. And we had one. We had one for probably about 10 years. And then it was kind of incorporated into the NAACP of Rock County. So that's an amazing organization. The Hedberg Public Library and Renee View is very much involved in that part of our organization, promoting and sponsoring programs that we're involved in. S&J Consulting is who I work with. Gene and I have that business, and I do a lot of this work for businesses, for schools, for profits and nonprofits. First Congregational United Church of Christ is a member of our organization. Community Health in Beloit is part of our organization, and School District of Janesville. And we're probably not done getting partners. We got to get the School District of Beloit actually works with us. They just haven't officially become part of our organization. So there we are. We have, tomorrow night, you could put this on your calendar. Tomorrow night we have a Courageous Conversation. It's 5:30 to 7. It's a Zoom call, which is nice, so people don't have to leave their home. And all you need to do, if you go to our website, the datrockco.org, you can get a link to the Courageous Conversation. Tomorrow night it happens to be about BIPOC. Did anybody know what BIPOC is? Leslie would know. She's the student I planted in the class with the answers, just in case I forgot. So Leslie, would you share with the group, BIPOC stands for?
Black and Indigenous People of Color.
And tomorrow's program is about Black, Indigenous people of color and how they work with the LGBTQ++ population, and how they work together as allies and working with each other back and forth. And please keep in mind, you don't need to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, etc., to work with those organizations. They're amazing people. And June is Pride Month. And so it's very fitting that our organization would have a program dealing with BIPOC, working with the LGBT population. Any questions on that, LGBT? It's not an area that diversity is so pervasive, it's so diverse, it's so different that nobody can ever be well versed in every part of diversity. When Jen said, I have an expert, I'm like looking over my shoulder, who's she talking about? I'm not an expert in anything, but I'm a generalist. I can talk about all of these topics and give you ideas to go and maybe teach you how to learn about it, but I don't know about all these things. But these are some of the topics that we've done recently with our Courageous Conversations. And Courageous Conversations is not something we created. It comes from a book that Gwen Singleton wrote back about 15 years ago, probably more like 20 years ago. And Courageous Conversations, his book is Courageous Conversations about race. Okay? We do Courageous Conversations about anything. And the Courageous Conversations about race starts out with the premises that we need to speak our truth. It's hard sometimes being honest with each other. We need to stay engaged. We need to accept and expect discomfort. And we need to come together and realize that we're never done with it. Accept non-closure. Non-closure. Just because David and I had a conversation today about something we're not comfortable talking about with each other, it doesn't mean we may not have that conversation again. Just because you and your wife, we have over 50% of our marriages in this country end up in divorce because we don't talk to each other during the times we need to be talking. But then it gets to the point that everything starts, we get too far down the road, and by the time we actually do want to have a discussion, it's too late to resolve the issues. So we move on and go our merry way. So having a courageous conversation, and when I do my training, I always tell people, remember those precepts, remember those 4 ideas. Speak your truth and stay engaged, because if you don't have those conversations, you're never going to get to the root of your issue if you're having problems. So every one of these topics, they're not all end-all topics. These are just some examples of the topics that we have. Beloit's Black History, Best Kept Secret. Some of you might remember, oh gosh, his name escapes me right now, but he was the head football coach of the Detroit Lions. James Caldwell. James Caldwell and his wife got together with Barbara Hickman from Beloit, and they put together a wonderful video, which is available in the Beloit Public Library. We probably have a copy of it in our library, on the history of Beloit. And we had a courageous conversation on the history of Beloit. We showed the video. It's a beautiful video. Talks about how the African American population was encouraged to come to Beloit, Wisconsin to work at Fairbanks Morse. And that's how Beloit got its name, Little Mississippi. A lot of these people came from Mississippi looking for work. And they built the flats. And they were going to get rid of the flats. And then our dear friend Wanda Sloan was part of a committee to keep those flats alive because it's part of the rich history of Beloit, Wisconsin, and on and on. So it's really pretty cool stuff. Dr. King, the Poor People's Campaign, our friends down at Community Action put together a video called Everyday Racism. Because we always hear people say, we've had a black president, Obama made it. Why are we still talking about race? We're done. Well, this video was done a little over a year ago, Everyday Racism, where people who live in Beloit, who work for Community Action, who are brown and black, are still dealing with looking over their shoulder every day, wondering if they'll get through the day without any issues. I remember my dear friend Bob Baldwin, who used to train with me in S&J Consulting. He passed away a few years ago. He and I were going to a training, and we were really new at training together. When you're training with somebody else, it's kind of like team teaching. You really need to have a connection, and I was just starting to connect with him. So Bob and I were heading down to a tiny little town in Illinois called Poplar Grove. The high school was having some issues. This rural community was having issues because those people were moving into the community and kind of messing up everything. They were messing up the way things happen. And Bob turns to me, I'm driving down the road, and he said, "Hey, Santo, I've got a question." "Yeah?" He said, "Did you think about being white this morning?" "What?" Now, I already knew this guy, and he's asked me if I thought about being white. I said, "No, why would I think about being white?" He said, "You don't have to." So I put it back on him. I said, "Did you think about being black this morning?" He said, "You bet I did." He said, "Every day I wake up," and he lived in Janesville. He was married to Kate Baldwin. Kate's mom was Gloria Ziegler, who was the first director, I believe, of the YWCA. He said, "There's not a day that goes by that I don't wake up and look over my shoulder and wonder how I'm going to get through my day." He said, "You don't have to think about that because you have privilege. You're a white guy." And at that time, the concept of privilege was pretty new to me, even though I was doing this work. You know, again, you're learning as you're going. So a lot of these things make it to our courageous conversations. There's lots of opportunities to talk, lots of opportunities to have interchange, even though it's on a Zoom call. And I'm hoping, Gina and I were discussing this the other day, I'm hoping we can eliminate the Zoom calls and maybe have it for people that can't attend, but to do it live again. Because it just seems, to me, it's just so much more realistic to be in the same room with people than working with a little icon that looks like a postage stamp. So these are some of our courageous conversations, some of the things we do. So if you look at this, these are other programs that we've done in the community over the years. You know, because the last 3 years were tough with COVID, and our programming ended up going to, Zooming calls. And we started out again with, COVID's impact on marginalized people. People who are normally down during good times are farther down during bad times. But they know how to handle it because that's part of their normal everyday life. They're used to not having the dollars for housing. They're used to being marginalized in different parts of the world, in different areas in housing, education, hospitals, etc. So here we're talking about voting. Matter of fact, Jean and I attended a birthday party yesterday in Pewaukee for Sam Leibert's little boy. And some of you might remember Sam Leibert. Sam was the president. He was actually the first black person who was ever on our city council, to my knowledge, and he was our president before he left Janesville of the city council. Well, his little son Ezra was 2 yesterday. And Sam has been working in city government over the years, and I said to him, "Sam, who are you working for now?" Because I know he left where he was working, the city he was working in. He said, I'm working for a group called Vote America. He said it's a nonpartisan group that's working on encouraging and getting more states, communities to have open voting without as much restrictions. So that's what he's doing. So I'm thinking about this, so you think you can vote. I'm doing a program right now where we're discussing the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And what a great breath of fresh air that is. And here we are in 2023, and we're dealing with people who are trying to come up with all kinds of restrictions to keep people from going to the polls. So it's like we're taking a step backwards. So it's really kind of sad. Marginalized groups, health, Native Americans, I don't see that here, but I saw it on the other slide. Boarding schools for Native Americans, and how absolutely horrendous those boarding schools were, taking culture away from our Native American people. And it's a joy for us to have Billy Bob in our community, who's Ojibwa, who's part of the Bad River tribe, and he does some amazing work as a trainer, but he also does amazing work in the Red Roadhouse, etc. And he is a great part of our organization. But what's interesting, if Billy Bob was in the room right now, and he won't mind me telling you this story, he used to be really quiet and introverted. He would hardly say a word. Because, as a native, he was raised not to like people that look like us. So he was pretty inhibited and pretty introverted. But then he got to meet people in the diversity action team around county, and it started out with somebody saying hi. And then he started communicating with us, and now we can't keep him quiet. If he gets in front of a group, you give Billy Bob a microphone, he's on, and I'm like, you gotta be done, Billy Bob. That Jen saying, Santo, you gotta be done. Or she'll say, stay in one place, because she keeps moving that camera around, and I'm like, I am not good at staying in one place. So these are just some examples, but every year since we've been an organization, we've connected with, it started out as a UAW thing, the Martin Luther King event at Black Hawk Technical College. Wesley stepped up when UAW was kind of faltering and General Motors kind of pulled out of the area to work on that committee, Martin Luther King event at Black Hawk Tech. This actually started at, what was the name of that store south of town? Pick and Save.
Oh, yeah.
We had an ethnic fest at Pick and Save. I remember teaching at the time, and I was bringing my kids in to experience all of these different foods. And it's a nice place to start, is with food. When you're dealing with varieties and diversity, food is a good place to start. It's like, ooh, I don't want to eat that. Oh, I don't. And Jean would always say, is it too hot? And I'd say, oh yeah, it's hot. You don't want to go and eat that. Lasting effects of eviction. A lot of us have never had to deal with that. But our friends, we have actually a lot more white people that experience a lot of these issues than brown and black people. But the brown and black people, unfortunately, are the ones that we seem to go out of our way to keep marginalized. And it's like, okay, what are we going to do to make those changes come about? So the piece that comes up, and it comes up all the time, is what is diversity? Where does it all come from? And if I was to ask you, you might give me an answer like, isn't it all about our color? Yeah. How about what's just differences, all about our differences, and it is. So some of you might remember, if you're football fans, probably 6 or 7 years ago, Coca-Cola had a commercial, and it had people singing the national anthem. Now remember, this is $1 million slot, every minute was like $1 million. And they were singing the national anthem in their native tongues. So it was in Russian, German, Italian, you name it, they were singing it. And then within seconds, there was pushback. And here we have on YouTube and all these, not YouTube yet, but just on social media, Coca-Cola is anti-American. We're American. We speak English, but we don't have a national language. These people that were saying that didn't realize we don't have a national language. Coca-Cola did not fold. And I'm not an advocate of Coca-Cola. I'm not promoting Coca-Cola. But Coca-Cola decided to come up with a follow-up to that video. And this is the follow-up, because this is what they said, is about America.
I am an American. I am an American. I'm a Filipino American.
I am Native American.
I'm an American.
I'm an American.
I'm an American.
I am a first-generation American.
I'm French American. I am a Palestinian American.
I am an American.
I am Puerto Rican and American.
I'm American.
I am an Arab American.
I'm an Israeli American.
I am an American.
And I love America.
What I love about America is it's my home. I was born and raised here.
The country is gorgeous, and the national parks and driving around is amazing.
We have a real good mixture of people in this country.
Every race, every ethnicity, every culture, every religion.
Different people coming from all over the world, sharing their food, sharing their languages.
It's the world in one country.
Whether you have a lot of money or whether you have a little bit of money,
If you're willing to study, work hard,
You can follow whatever your dreams are.
it's a lot of freedom, you know? You can do a lot of stuff.
Where there's people, nature, creation, I can love that.
It doesn't really matter what cultural group you come from, you're given a voice.
So here is the first place that we should learn how to unite, how to live together.
I think we all have seen prejudice, one time or another.
It's really hard to believe that that even still exists.
you know, somebody had called me, those foreigners. And I just thought that was funny because actually they were the foreigners. And I remember sitting in the cafeteria one day and I looked around and I was the only one with brown skin and black hair and I stood out.
It was really hard for Danette's family to accept a white guy.
It's been very hard for my family when it comes to the gay issue, and it's been what caused us so much pain over all these years.
In middle school, as an Arab American, I used to be very afraid to tell them where I'm from.
It's really hard to hear your sister go through something like that. You don't need anybody else to tell you, oh, this is how you have to be, or stay in this box, and let them pull you down.
You know who you are, and you should embrace who you are.
And I still have faith that people can grow and learn.
Today I see, people asking us to hold hands, people embracing us as a family and respecting us.
I feel lucky, very proud I can have what I have right now. It's my family. I work very hard like everybody else and try to have my own business, and I got it.
As a first-generation college student, it's one of the biggest accomplishments in my life. I'm so happy. And I get to come here and I get to dance, and it's so emotional for me.
We don't get to pick and choose whether America should be diverse or not. It is diverse.
I love that we were able to show America that we can be represented in a different light. It's a beautiful thing.
When you fall in love with someone who is different than you are, there's this incredible potential. I feel like we kind of form a bridge between our two families that would never have existed otherwise.
I've never felt like I was a brown person in a group of white people, which was incredible. So thankful for that.
We are diverse. Then instead of judging or being afraid or, making fun of all the different types of diversities and creating these stereotypes, we need to wash all that away and we need to celebrate all the different diversities.
I'm hoping through commercials and things like that, that just the little snippets of 60 seconds in someone's day can add a question to their mind, like, well, why do I act like that? Or why do I feel this way?
Coke is spreading this message of being culturally connected.
Now you get to help other people make something positive out of it.
We could have one thing in common, and it could be that we like Coke. I'm just proud to be a part of it.
I like to treat people like I like to be treated, and I like to be treated good, and I want to treat people right.
Yo me siento feliz en América. Gracias.
And we're not selling any Coca-Cola today, so get that out of your mind. We're not promoting Coke. But I think they did an amazing job. You know, corporate America sometimes has a tendency to kind of like hide under the radar, and they don't want to, you know, make an issue of an issue. But in this case, they said, this is who we are. And as you, if we were actually doing a training right now, I'd have you list a whole bunch of things that you saw in that video that represents diversity. Anything in that video that stands out in your mind, that stands out? Peggy.
I had a theory for decades. I've had a theory, a personal belief for decades that interracial marriage is the way that we're going to change. Because I think it's really hard to make somebody an other when they are part of your family and a loved one. And I think then you learn to look beyond it. So I was pleased to get a little affirmation for the fact that at least it's a smidgen of it.
Yeah.
Because all the talk in the world, in a setting in which I don't have a personal vested interest, doesn't change me in the same way that something where it hits my heart.
Yeah.
With the people I love. So I really liked that little piece in that especially. So thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Peggy. Anybody else? Something that stands out in your mind with that video? Anything else kind of resonate with you?
I didn't see a lot of old people.
You did?
I did
not see a lot of old people. My hope is with youth. My hope is also with all of us who want to make change. Because most of us in this room go into the category that Leslie didn't see in that video. We're older, more mature senior citizens, and we are who we are. When people say, you know, all the young people, well, young people could be part of the Proud Boys. Young people could be part of organizations that are, you know, causing issues in our country as well. But my hope is with youth. My hope is with people who have open minds and open hearts, who want to see change in a positive way. One of the many things I like about this video is the gal, the Arab young lady, who said, well, America is diverse not because we chose to be, we're diverse because we are. Think about this. There's people in this country from all over the world. Over 150 nations are represented in the United States. And it's not because we planned on becoming a diverse nation when our founding fathers organized this country, but we are diverse because people came here for whatever reason. Most people came here because they chose to, but you know, you can go back 250 plus years and you have people that were brought here against their will, and we still have people who were brought here against their will in trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. And now it's a matter of how do we build bridges to help them feel welcome? How do we develop that inclusivity that's just not an automatic? So we have celebrated our 25th anniversary in May, and we're excited about that. Angela Moore, the former director of the YWCA, is on our board, and she came up with the Sankofa bird. And the Sankofa bird is a symbol in Ghana, and the bird is looking back, and it's the idea of reflecting on the past to change the future. And that's what she looks at our organization, as looking back. Ken Burns may ring a bell with some of you. Ken Burns wrote about baseball, he wrote about Babe Ruth, he wrote about the Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. And Ken Burns once said, if we don't know where we've come from, we won't understand where we are. And we won't have a clue where we're headed. So we need to understand our history. The Sankofa bird was a way of saying, we cannot forget the past, because the past is why we're where we are today. And we need to figure out how do we tweak it, and how do we make changes. And so I thought that was a great symbol of who we are. So this is a PowerPoint that talks about people that we can connect with, people we can relate to. Rosa Parks in the bus boycott back in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. Or, you know, Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I actually took kids from Craig, Parker, and Beloit Memorial to Atlanta, Georgia, to walk in the steps of Dr. King. And on one of those trips, we actually had the privilege of meeting with Coretta Scott King. And she met with my students. And she shook my hand, and I'll never forget, she shook my hand and she looked in my eyes and she said, sir, Martin would want people like you to continue telling the story. She said, because the day will come when people will deny we ever went through all this. And Eisenhower, remember that guy, Dwight Eisenhower? He said the same thing to people when we started to liberate the camps. the concentration camps. He said, I want every reporter and every photographer to take pictures and to write stories, because the day will come when people would deny we ever had this event in the history of the world. And we live in that time right now, when people are Holocaust deniers. So here you have Bobby Kennedy, and of course John Kennedy and Gandhi. So our organization, you know, tries to deal with the history and the information that these people shared. You know, Gandhi, be the change you want to be. Dolores Huerta, one of the leaders in the Latino movement with the workers, the farm workers. And we have Dennis Blackburn in the middle, who was part of the Native American movement. You may recall the Black Power movement in the 60s led to the Red Power movement in the 70s. It was all about getting recognition. It had nothing to do with saying, you know, we want Black Power had nothing to do with we fight for power, but it was do whatever we need to do to gain recognition and acknowledgement, etc. And I remember Stokely Carmichael once said, power is in your definition means different than power in our concept. It doesn't mean we won't use force if we need to, but we'll do whatever we need to do to get recognized in this world. So here we are with Katie Udell and Janet Labrie and Carrie Hawkins at a Diversity Action Team event called what, Jean? Speed Friending. It came out shortly around the time that people were getting emails. Do you want to be my friend? Will you join me on Facebook or whatever? So we brought, as you can see, we had a meeting. We had a bunch of people at these meetings, and we would exchange information about each other. You know, and just because we may appear to be all the same in this room, there's no two of us in this room that are the same. Even white people are diverse, by golly. We have different ethnic groups, different culture, different backgrounds, different religions, etc. So there's lots of diversity in there. So people who want to make a difference, Diversity Action Team in Rock County, key is to take action. If it's writing to your senator, representative, whatever it may be, or participating and sharing your stories. Here's Billy Bob. This is a really started out to be an amazing event, but it was a sad event. It's when Sawi Urshan opened up the Dawa Center in the 4th Ward. And he invited Billy Bob to bring his drum, very sacred thing, native drum, and he brought his eagle feathers with him. And Billy Bob was getting lots of hate mail from Janesville, anonymous mail, saying, don't you go there. We do not want you there. Don't hang out with those Muslims. Remember what they did in 9/11. And Billy Bob was so concerned that he didn't bring his grandchildren. He would always bring his older grandchildren to events that he was drumming at, but he didn't bring them to that event, the Ecumenical Dawa Center event, which was just a little bit before COVID. And there's a Neil Dupree and Fred Shalpar and Jaleh with Saleh and his, no, actually his wife's not there, but his daughters are there at the Dawa Center. Diversity is our strength. It makes us who we are. But please keep in mind, we have all these things that make us diverse, but we have much more in common with people that don't look like us. Much more in common. And Stephen Covey wrote in his book, you may have read the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In his book, he says, it's our differences that make us stand out. It's our differences that make us unique. You don't call anybody in to roof your house. You call someone who has that skill and that talent. You don't call anybody to do your electrical work or anybody to be your teacher or your attorney. You call people that have those skills. Even though you have a lot more in common, it's our skills, our special talents that make us stand out. So diversity is pretty unique from that standpoint. Like, what is your background? What is your ability or disability from that standpoint? But usually the elephant in the room that nobody really ever wants to address is race. And please keep in mind, race is a non-scientific concept. If you're an anthropologist, a sociologist, whatever you may be, you will not find any substantial way of supporting race. Race was a way of the Greeks, Ptolemy and Aristotle, trying to put things in order. They wanted to put people in order. So people that came from the area like northeast of China, around Mongolia, and they had yellowish skin and thin noses and thin lips, they called them Mongoloids. And people that came from Africa, they had darker skin, thicker lips, fatter noses, They called them Negroids. And the people that came from the area around the Caucasus Mountains, around the Ukraine today, they had lighter hair, blue eyes, light skin, thin lips. They called them Caucasoids. So if you go back to that time period, they said we had 3 races in the world. Well, what about all the other people in the world that don't fit into those boxes? So race is basically a non-scientific concept. So with that said, these are some of the things we do. We participate in the Martin Luther King celebration. We have study circles. We haven't done study circles in a while, and we love to do them, but we need at least 10, 12 people to do study circles. Leslie's one of the trainers. Study circles is a 6-week program. Your commitment is 2 hours a week for 6 weeks to basically explore your own personal ideas dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We do workshops. We haven't done a workshop for a while as a diversity action team. We do the Courageous Conversations. We do work with the Janesville Police Department. Actually, some of us sit on the African American Liaison Advisory Committee to the Police Department. And I'm really sad to read about Chief Moore leaving Janesville in that position. I'm happy for him because he's earned a vacation. He's only been with us for 47 years or 45 years. I don't understand why he's leaving now, but he is. But he's done some amazing work. And actually, our last meeting was a month ago, and we brought people in from Jumpstart, which is part of a organization that was started by Gina Stevens on our county board. And the room was, I was in the minority in the room. Chief Moore was in the minority. We had more brown and black people in the room. And they were actually applauding the Janesville Police Department for the way they have been treated. And Chief Moore looked at me and he smiled, and afterwards he said, "What a great way to have a meeting. This is the best meeting I've ever been to because I'm getting some really positive feedback." Because he's really worked hard at developing those relationships. And of course, we also have a connection with the Janesville Diversity Action Team, the Native American group, the Allies of Native Nations. And they're in the process of trying to get the history corrected. We're taking down some of the signs and putting up correct signs. Like in Palmer Park, there's something about Chief Blackhawk, which historically is not accurate, and they're in the process of getting that corrected, etc. So here we have a few people you might recognize: Mark Perry, Cameron Mirza, Angela Moore, Tammy Baldwin, and Chief Moore, who received awards at one of our last in-person, probably going back before COVID, when they got awards for peace and justice issues at Blackhawk Tech. Here's some of our programs with Tammy DeGarmo, actually talking about 1649. So again, diversity, we cover a variety of different issues that are out there. Here's some interesting data, and I'm gonna just swing all the way over to 2021 in Janesville Gazette. As of 2021, the white population was a little over 90%, Latinos 9.1, African Americans 5.3. But the thing I always think about, by 2030, 2040, they say the largest population in the United States will be, help me out, in the United States, not Jamesburg, but the United States. What'd you say, Peg?
I said brown.
Brown. Latinos.
Yeah.
Latinx population will be the largest population by 2030, 2040. And that makes sense if you just look around. Just look around this country, look around our area here. The next largest population below the Latinos will be the mixed population, the groups that you're talking about, Peggy. I mean, people get in there. The next population below the mix will be African American. One below them will be Asian Americans. So between the Latinos, the mixed, the African American, and the Asian American will represent about 70% of our population. So the whites, Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans, they'll represent about 30% of our population. So I always say, if you want to take some time to get to know people that aren't like you, do it now, because your grandkids are going to have them running the country. You know, so figure out a way of working with people who are different.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
How does it add up to more than 100%?
80.3.
What did you get?
For white.
It says 90.3, but it
should be 80.
Oh, it should be 80.3? Is that right, the top number?
I think, no, I don't think so. But that's a good question, and I don't have the answer for that.
Well, because if you add all those up, it should add up to 100.
Right.
I taught math, first and second.
Well, I don't have an answer for you because I just shared a slide that is not even my
Janesville
slide.
Gazette made an error in their math.
But if it was 80, 89, that might be a little bit closer. That could be a typo.
Are there any other, is this working? Any other questions for Santo before he goes on?
How can you ask me a question I don't have an answer for? One thing you learn as being a trainer is you never have all the answers. So thank you, Leslie, for that question. Jean? So with that said, we've been really proud to be involved with the YWCA, and I believe this year is 2023, so this will be our 9th Racial Justice Conference. And I am very grateful to Angela Moore for bringing a Racial Justice Conference to Rock County. That really took an awful lot of courage and work on her part when she was director of the YWCA. And I think I'm gonna, here's just some examples of some of the things we do and things that you can do. You can actually join the Diversity Action Team in Rock County by just going to our website, datrockco.org, and you can download a membership form. And, these are some of the things you can do. And we operate as a 501c3 under the umbrella of the Community Foundation of Southern Wisconsin. That just takes care of a whole lot of things that we don't want to do. The finances, the legal ramifications, etc. And then here's a bunch of happy people. And this goes back, again, this is before COVID, before we actually had to go back to do Zooming and things along those lines. And I wanted to share this with you before we go. Jean's saying to me, moving on, come on, you're going to run out of time. But no one's going anywhere at 10:30, so I'm going to show this to you. It's only 20 minutes. No, I'm only kidding. Chaz Calais has some amazing videos, and this is one that I just love on how we can work with people that don't look like us. I'd like to leave you with some things that you can do other than joining, or in addition to joining the DAT.
So I'm trying something different with my setup, and I don't know if it's working, but you will deal. Imagine your friend is building a house and they ask you to help, but you've never built a house before. So it'd probably be a good idea for you to put on some protective gear and listen to the person in charge. Otherwise, someone's gonna get seriously hurt. Look, I'm helping! It's the exact same idea when it comes to being an ally. An ally is a person that wants to fight for the equality of a marginalized group that they're not a part of. We need your help building this house, but you probably should listen so you know what to do first. Let's do this. So here are my 5 tips for being a good ally. Understand your privilege. Now, a lot of people get hung up on the word privilege, so let me break it down for you nice and easy. Privilege does not mean that you are rich, that you have an easy life, that everything's been handed to you and you've never had to struggle or work hard. All it means is that there are some things in life that you will not experience or ever have to think about just because of who you are. It's kind of like those horses that have those blinders on. They can see just fine. There's just a whole bunch of stuff on the side that they don't even know exists. So for example, there are currently 29 states where you can legally be fired for being gay, and there are 34 states where you can legally be fired for being trans. Now, as a straight cis woman, those are things that I don't have to ever think about if I don't want to. I'm not going to be fired because I'm straight, and I'm not going to be fired because I'm cis. So it makes sense that before I can fight for the rights of others, I have to understand what rights I have and others don't. That's privilege. Listen and do your homework. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not possible for you to learn if you aren't willing to listen. So you gotta know when to zip up the lip up. I don't know. You get what I mean. But that's the thing that's so cool about social media. There are so many people sharing their stories all around the world and connecting with people that they normally would never get a chance to without the power of the internet. So do your homework. Start reading blogs, tweets, news articles, and stories so that you can get caught up on the issues that are important to the communities that you want to support. Speak up, but not over. If the Fight for Equality was a girl group, the ally wouldn't be the lead singer or the second lead singer. They'd be Michelle. An ally's job is to support. You want to make sure that you use your privilege and your voice to educate others, but make sure to do it in such a way that does not speak over the community members that you're trying to support or take credit for things that they are already saying. This isn't Mario Kart. Stay in your lane. Realize that you're going to make mistakes and apologize when you do. Nobody's perfect. Unlearning problematic things takes time and work, so you are bound to mess up and trip and fall. But don't worry, you can brush yourself off and get right back up. And back up! But just remember that it's not about your intent, it's about your impact. So when you get called out, make sure to listen, apologize, commit to changing your behavior, and move forward. Last but certainly not least, actually the most important thing on this list is remember that ally is a verb. Saying you're an ally is not enough. You gotta do the work. 1 through 4. 1 through 4. As always, there.
So I want to jump in and just basically reinforce what you said. Ally is a verb, to be involved in an ally, do things, to assist, to help build bridges. And how many times have we said, I didn't mean, I didn't mean, I didn't mean? The intention may be very good, but the impact sometimes hurts. And the intention doesn't matter at all. It's the impact that matters. It's how we impact other people. So it's really important to kind of, put that in mind. She does a great job with that, and these are her 5 comments. Ending up that ally is a verb. So I left no time. No, actually, you could have asked questions anytime during the event, and Leslie did. So, any other questions? Yes, Chris.
Question, Santo, as a former social studies teacher, do you know if you referred to this earlier, Janesville's history with restricted covenants? Is this taught in the school district of Janesville at any level?
Right now?
Right
Is what taught now?
Janesville's history with restricted covenants.
Probably
and the
not.
connection of that history with GM.
I would
the
say
connection
probably
of that
not.
history with Beloit.
We did teach it, well, I shouldn't say we, I taught it when I was teaching African American studies, because it was part of what I put into the curriculum, was local stuff. Is it being taught now? Probably not, because I'm not convinced there's people that are doing it. I'm not convinced it's happening.
Okay. Does Diversity Action Team have conversations with the school district of Janesville and with the other school districts that you're attempting to draw in about curriculum and about what we're teaching our kids about our racial history?
It's interesting when Mark, what's his last name?
Perry?
No, the head superintendent.
Holzman.
Holzman. A month after he was in, we met with him. And we basically told him about our organization and what we do, and asked him to join our, maybe not join, but he's joined our organization. The school district is part of our organization. We have not specifically talked to him about curricular issues, because that's kind of like, we don't want to overstep our bounds either. But he does know we exist. He knows what we're about. In Beloit, Willie Garrison's the superintendent there, and we have connected with Willie. Mark Perry has connected with him, and has actually done some work for him down in Beloit. So in answer to your question, yes and no.
Okay.
And I really like the idea of sitting down and doing curriculum with them, but I didn't even do that when I was teaching. I mean, I wrote curriculum that I wanted to teach. I didn't necessarily have to run it by anybody. It seems like we live in a day and age now where all your curriculum needs to be approved by every legislature that exists, who knows nothing about education.
Well, I raised this.
That's on tape.
Ooh, cut that. No, keep that.
I raised this issue because within the last year, I know it was within the last year because I remember where I was when I was reading articles in the Gazette about this. The issues of critical race theory have risen, and to the extent, and the kerfuffle about what's being taught in our schools, the critical race theory being taught in our schools. And there were some letters to the editor in the Gazette that were coming from the right that were very, it seemed very misinformed. But I think a lot of people in the community really don't know what's going on in terms of what our kids are being taught. It seems to me there would be merit in getting the word out about what our kids are, what is being taught, as opposed to leaving it up to the imagination of people who are thinking the worst.
And you bring up something that is worth talking about. We have had a program on critical race theory. It was one of our courageous conversations that we did probably, 3 or 4 sessions ago. And we've told people what critical race theory is. And it's something that's been taught at a university level for graduate students who are going into law. because they need to understand some of the thinking in with the Constitution, but we don't teach that at the high school level. We never have taught it. And a lot of the people who are involved in our legislature, I'm not convinced if you sat them down and asked them what critical race theory was that you get the same answer twice. But we're on tape now, so we'll put that on the back burner for next time.
I did want to say one more thing.
Okay, you're on.
I think education is the key, and we all have to start with ourselves. You have to be the one to know what this is all about. And there is going to be an opportunity on the 12th of August. Down at Hedberg Library, there's a movie called White Like Me that's going to be shown. It's a documentary, and then there's a discussion. There will be 2 facilitators there for a discussion. It's something that our AAUW Diverse Discussions Group decided we wanted to do for the city of Janesville. And so that's from like 10 until 12 on a Saturday at Hedberg Library. And that's a good place to start. And I would suggest when you come in, sit next to somebody that's not like you. I try to do that anytime I go to something. I don't want to sit next to an old white-haired lady. I usually try to find a young, dark-haired man. So.
That's why she sits next to me.
Yeah.
So, gotta watch that girl. So let me leave you with a thought. Education from Leslie, and from Santo, work on being comfortable, being uncomfortable, building the bridges. Because sometimes you have to be uncomfortable doing that.
I think Janesville is really putting itself also having African-American man as their school superintendent.
Yeah, they're long overdue. Long overdue. And they actually have an African-American superintendent in Boyd as well.
That doesn't surprise me as much. No.
They have their, every school district seems to have their issues, and as Peggy can talk to, it's a difficult issue to deal with, and it's hard getting people of color to actually come into this area. Thank you. Thanks for being such a great group.
I think your wife wants to say something.
I do.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I guess.
Hello.
She found that tall, dark, handsome guy to sit next to her. Where was he?
We have a few committees with DAT, and I really appreciate your suggestion. I think that is well-founded as far as the curriculum, and there's going to be much more discussion about it, fortunately or unfortunately. So let's take that idea to the board.
Sure.
And Peggy, I loved what you said about interracial marriages, because that's what I've thought for a long time. And we have a new committee that's called the Community Connection Committee, and we felt as a group that we needed to address families and work with the little ones, have that interaction. And so on August 12th, if you'd like to join us, volunteer in any way, or attend with your family, your grandchildren, we're going to have following Leslie's AAUW program, we're going to have a summer cultural fest, and we're inviting the diversity we see within the community of Janesville, and just hoping to have that one-on-one, the interaction that we so desperately need, because a lot of us don't have a chance to, to reach out to people like Leslie would be sitting next to. We have a wonderful opportunity, and so I'm inviting you August 12th, and I'll ask Jen to put this in the bulletin for us.
And you're bringing in Rock County.
Rock County.
Yes.
Not just Janesville. It's a Rock County thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.